In the quiet fishing village of Selwyn Bay, time moved slowly, like the tide that kissed the shore and then slipped away. Life there was simple: salt on the wind, creaking docks, and nets full of silver fish. Among its people was a young woman named Elara, known for her gentle spirit and the way she always carried a lantern in her hands, as if guarding a secret flame. She was in love with Aidan, a fisherman with eyes as blue as the sea he braved. They had grown up together, their hearts tethered long before they understood the meaning of love. Every evening, after the sun sank into the ocean and the village lights dimmed, Elara would wait for Aidan by the pier, her lantern glowing like a star on earth. One autumn night, just before the monsoon season rolled in, Aidan knelt by the waves and pressed something small into her hand. It was a ring made of woven seagrass and a single pearl, his promise. "When the storm is over," he whispered, "I'll return to marry you. Keep the light burning for me." She nodded through tears, clutching both the ring and his vow. But that night, the sea roared louder than it ever had. Boats vanished. So did Aidan. Everyone believed he was lost to the storm, claimed by the depths. But Elara refused to accept it. Every night, from then on, she lit the same lantern and placed it by the shore, not for hope, for loyalty. "I made a promise," she told the waves, "and I will keep it until he keeps his. The sea may have taken Aidan, but it could not take her devotion." The lantern never went out. Seasons passed in Selwyn Bay, as they always did. The monsoon gave way to spring, and spring to the golden calm of summer. Children who once played barefoot on the docks grew taller. Boats were repaired. New sails were sewn. Life, in its quiet and relentless way, continued. But one thing never changed: the small lantern that glowed each night on the edge of the pier. Elara became a fixture in the village, the girl who waited. At first, people spoke her name with sympathy. "Poor Elara," they would say. "Still holding on." But as years trickled by and the weariness of time settled into the eyes of her neighbors, that sympathy turned to quiet disapproval, and then to forgetfulness. They didn't understand. For them, Aidan had become a ghost, a story, a tragic figure swallowed by a violent sea. For Elara, he was still real. Not in the fantasy sense of denial, but in the sacred space where promises live. His memory wasn't a chain. It was a vow. She never wore black for mourning. She wore the same sea-green shawl he once admired, stitched with the initials they had carved into the dock as children. She never cried in public. But each evening, as dusk fell, she would light the lantern, place it on the wooden post where Aidan last kissed her forehead, and whisper, "Still waiting." Some tried to intervene. Her childhood friend Mira brought her books about grief, whispered words of closure, even introduced her to a kind merchant named Tom. "You deserve happiness," Mira urged, but Elara would only smile, gently. "I'm not sad," she said. "I'm in love." The villagers thought her lonely, but they were wrong. She had conversations with the sea, with the stars, with the wind that sometimes, just sometimes, felt like it carried the echo of his voice. Time gave her lines on her face and silver in her hair, but her heart remained untouched by years. The lantern still burned every night, without fail. She never missed a single one. Even when storms returned and the sea lashed the shore, Elara sat beneath her hooded cloak, shielding the flame with trembling hands. Children grew up hearing the tale. Some called it a legend, others a lesson. But to Elara, it was simply her life. A life lived in promise. A life lived in patience. One boy once asked her, "Miss Elara, what if he never comes back?" She paused, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the sun always dipped. "Then I'll still be here," she said softly. Because love isn't only about return. It's about what you keep alive, even when the world stops watching. That night, the waves shimmered under a full moon, and the lantern glowed as if powered by something more than oil and wick. The village had moved on, but Elara remained, not because she was frozen in the past, but because she had chosen something most could not understand. A kind of love untouched by time, immune to doubt, a love that waited, a love that kept a promise, a love that lit a lantern and refused to let it die. The 17th year came with a cold unlike any Elara had felt before. Not the kind that seeped into bones, but the kind that wrapped around memory. Quiet, distant, forgetting. Selwyn Bay was changing. New families moved in. Old cottages were rebuilt with modern walls, and the pier was extended to welcome bigger ships from the southern cities. The old docks, where Aidan and Elara once carved their initials, had begun to rot. Salt had eaten through the beams. Moss crept along the edges. Still, each evening, she came. The lantern flickered weakly these days. The glass had cracked during last winter's storm, and the oil became harder to find as the village store stopped stocking what no one uses anymore. Elara adapted, melting wax, mixing herbs, anything to keep the light alive. For it was no longer just a beacon. It had become an extension of her soul. That year, she began to hear things. At first, she thought it was the wind, whispers just above the hum of the tide. Then came the dreams. In them, she stood on the dock in the dead of night, the lantern glowing brighter than ever. Across the water, a figure stood barefoot in a boat, face obscured by mist, hand stretched toward her. Every time she reached back, she awoke. Alone, breath caught in her throat. Word of her visions spread quickly. The villagers, ever hungry for distraction, made her into something else. The pier witch, the ghost bride, the widow of the sea. Children dared each other to run past her in the dark. Teenagers carved jokes into the wood planks where she waited, but she never scolded, never cried. Instead, Elara whispered into the sea, "If you're still out there, I haven't moved." Then one evening, as the sun dipped low and stained the waves gold, she saw something unusual. A small wooden bottle washed ashore, its cork sealed, its glass dusty with age. Inside, a faded piece of parchment and something glinting. With trembling hands, she uncorked it. The scroll, aged and sea-worn, bore 3 words, "Still sailing home." Beneath it, tied to a ribbon, was a charm she had given Aidan before he left, a compass locket with her portrait inside. The breath fled her body. She clutched the message to her chest, heart pounding with an ache, both joyful and painful. Was it real? A coincidence? A trick of the sea? She didn't care, because for the first time in 17 years, something had whispered back. That night, the lantern didn't just glow. It blazed. As if the fire knew. As if the flame had waited, too. The villagers noticed, of course. How could they not? The pier seemed lit by something more than oil or wick. But no one dared to approach her, for they sensed what she already knew. The sea had begun to answer, and perhaps love, when it burns long enough, doesn't fade into silence. It echoes, it returns. From the moment Elara found the message in the bottle, everything changed. Not in the way most people imagine, with fireworks or sudden reunions, but in the way hope changes the weight of air. She began walking differently, shoulders back, chin higher, steps more certain. At the market, people still whispered behind her back, but now their voices were softer, less mocking. Some even smiled at her, unsure why they felt compelled to. Children no longer ran from her shadow. A few began leaving small paper boats at the edge of the dock, hoping they too might catch the sea's attention. But it was what came next that truly unsettled her heart. 3 weeks after the bottle, another arrived, tucked between seaweed and driftwood, sealed in the same careful way. This time, the scroll was longer. No signature, no name, just words written in the same slanted script Elara had read in love letters from long ago. The stars are different here. They burn brighter, like fire pressed through glass. I've seen them from a deck rimmed in frost, where men speak little but think loudly. Some speak of ports, of home, of names they no longer remember. I speak of you. Her hands trembled. It was Aiden's handwriting. She read it again and again, until her tears blurred the ink. The letter didn't say where he was or how it had found its way to her. But she didn't need that. She had the one thing she thought she'd lost forever: connection. Each week, another letter came. No ship was ever seen. No footsteps marked the shore. Just bottles, delivered quietly, reverently, as if the sea itself had become a postman for souls in longing. The letters weren't always poetic. Sometimes they rambled. Sometimes they seemed unfinished, like thoughts written between storms. I still wear the compass, you know. It stopped working long ago, but it still feels like home in my palm. There's a boy on board who plays the violin at sunset. His music reminds me of the wind in your hair. I don't know what year it is anymore. Time is different out here, but I still remember your laugh. It echoes louder than cannon fire. Elara kept them all, tucked in a wooden box beneath the bed, tied in ribbon the color of seafoam. People asked questions. A journalist from the city even came, offering to write a story about her miracle. Elara refused every time. This wasn't a tale for tabloids or tourists. This was sacred. And while some doubted, claiming she must be writing them herself, no one could explain the bottle that arrived during a violent storm, soaked but intact, with ink that smelled faintly of brine and smoke. The storm last night nearly took us, but I thought of you and held the mast. I swore I heard your voice, whispering, "Hold fast." And I did. Elara's reply was always the same, spoken aloud, never written. I'm here, still waiting, still burning. The villagers watched her differently now, not with pity, but with a quiet reverence, as if they too felt something shift in the wind, something ancient and unexplained. And the lantern, once a symbol of mourning, now burned with renewed purpose. It was no longer just a signal to a lost lover. It had become a lighthouse for faith itself. It was a summer evening, the kind where the sea whispered lullabies and the lantern's glow shimmered on gentle waves like golden thread. Elara sat on the porch of her cottage, as she had for decades. Her fingers curled around a cup of tea gone cold. The wind smelled of salt and wild roses. Then came the knock, not the wind brushing the shutters or a child's playful tap, but a solid, deliberate knock on the door. She stood slowly, heart echoing in her ears like a drum. For years, she'd imagined this moment. Eyes closed, fingers trembling, breath held. But now that it was here, she felt. Still, when she opened the door, she saw a man. Not young, not old, just weathered. His coat was worn, the color of smoke. His boots bore the story of distant places, and his eyes, green like the sea after a storm, held something she had only seen once before. But it wasn't Aiden. "Forgive me," he said, voice low and thick like ocean fog. "Are you Elara?" She nodded, guarded. He reached into his coat and pulled out a soaked leather pouch, sealed with wax. "He asked me to bring this to you. He couldn't come." Elara's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her fingers closed around the pouch, as though it might vanish if she didn't grip it tightly enough. "I met him near the Arctic Circle," the man continued, removing his cap. A jagged scar stretched across his forehead. "He saved my life when our vessel was caught in the ice. We shared stories by firelight, and one night he spoke of you." The man's gaze dropped, full of unspoken weight. He knew he wouldn't survive the return voyage, but he made me swear. "Find her," he said. "Tell her I never stopped loving her. Tell her the lantern kept me alive longer than any medicine ever could." Elara's knees weakened, and she clutched the doorframe. Tears welled, not of grief, but of release. She opened the pouch with reverent hands. Inside, she found 3 things. The broken compass she had given him the day he left, now worn smooth by decades of storms. A lock of her own hair, once hidden in his coat, now tied with string. And a letter, tattered, sea-worn, the ink faded but legible. "My dearest light, if you are reading this, I am already in the sea's embrace. But don't mourn. You gave me more than time. You gave me eternity. I saw you in every sunrise over foreign waters. I heard your voice in the creak of every mast. I loved you, not in years, but in breaths, each one pulled toward the thought of you. I don't ask for your tears, only that you keep the lantern lit. Not for me, but for the kind of love that never yields to distance, time, or doubt. Yours, always, Aiden." The wind shifted then. The lantern flickered, and for the first time in years, Elara laughed. Not because she was happy, not because she had found closure, but because love, real love, had found its way across oceans, frozen horizons, and the edge of mortality to say, I never left. The stranger with the scar tipped his hat. He was right about you, he said. You're the kind of woman stories should be written about. She smiled through her tears. He already wrote mine. The morning after the stranger's visit, the town woke to an unusual sight. The lantern outside Elara's cottage, once a quiet symbol of waiting, was burning brighter than it ever had. Its light no longer whispered sorrow, but glowed with a warmth that touched every soul who passed by. Fishermen paused mid-step. Children tugged at their mothers' skirts to point, and elders murmured softly, as if in prayer. But the biggest surprise was Elara herself. She emerged not in her usual shawl of gray, but in a deep blue cloak, Aiden's favorite color. Her steps were slow, yet steady. Her eyes, though tired, shimmered with something both new and ancient. She walked to the town square that day, for the first time in decades, and with her she brought a story. People gathered, drawn not just by curiosity, but by something deeper, an invisible thread stitched by the years she had sat in silence. Elara told them everything, not just about Aiden, but about love that doesn't demand proof, about devotion that isn't loud, but unshakable, about how the world teaches us to move on, to forget, to distract, but how some things are not meant to be buried just because they ache. She spoke of promises kept across oceans and letters that arrived long after breath had gone. She spoke of faith, not in religion or fate or happy endings, but in the quiet knowing that some loves are not meant to return. They are meant to remain. The crowd was silent, moved not by drama, but by truth. And when she finished, a boy no older than 12 asked her, "What will you do now, Miss Elara?" She looked at the lantern in the distance, then back at the boy. "I'll teach people how to light their own," she said. And so she did. Weeks turned into months, and Elara's home became more than a cottage. It became a sanctuary. People from distant towns came to see the woman who waited, not for a man, but for meaning. She taught them to build lanterns, not just with glass and flame, but with patience, hope, and loyalty. She started a tradition. Every year, on the night of the full moon in midsummer, everyone in the village would light a lantern, not for someone lost, but for someone loved, living or gone, near or far. They called it the Night of Lights, and on that night, the entire coastline shimmered with floating gold. From the cliffs to the harbors, from windows to boats, every soul glowed. It wasn't about grief anymore. It was about gratitude, for Elara had taught them that the greatest kind of love isn't the one that ends in reunion. It's the one that remains, even after the ship never returns. And while Aidan never came back in body, he lived on in every light that flickered in the night. His memory was no longer Elara's burden. It was everyone's blessing, and she became the keeper of the lanterns, the woman who waited, and in doing so, illuminated the world. Years passed. Seasons rolled over the hills like gentle tides, and the town grew, softened by the glow of a tradition born from one woman's love. Elara aged, as all must. Her hair turned the color of sea foam, kissed by moonlight. Her hands, once steady with a lantern's wick, grew slow and fragile. Yet her eyes, oh, her eyes, never lost that quiet flame, the one Aidan had sparked so long ago. Every midsummer, on the night of lights, she still made the journey to the cliff's edge. Villagers would offer to carry her lantern, but she always refused with a smile. "It's my promise," she would say, "still mine to hold." And so, even as her body weakened, her spirit stood tall. A lighthouse for all hearts adrift. One year, as the town prepared for the festival, Elara didn't appear at her window. Concerned, the villagers climbed the hill. They found her seated peacefully in her favorite chair, the lantern resting on the sill beside her, lit, glowing warmly, as if it knew she was gone. No tears fell right away, only silence, reverent and deep. The town didn't mourn her with black veils or hollow rituals. Instead, they lit every lantern early that night. From rooftops to rowboats, thousands of golden flames danced in the wind, each one a thank you, a vow, a whisper of gratitude. But what truly stunned them came days later. Children playing in her old cottage found something beneath the floorboards, a wooden chest filled with handwritten letters. Not from Aidan, from Elara. Each one addressed to a soul who had ever come to her seeking comfort. She had written hundreds over the years, letters never sent, but full of wisdom and warmth. Some spoke of healing, others of waiting, and some simply reminded the reader, "You are not alone." The town read them aloud in the square for weeks. They compiled the letters, bound them in leather, and titled it The Lantern Keeper's Book of Light. It spread beyond their village. Travelers came from distant lands, drawn not by spectacle, but by something harder to name, something sacred. They came to feel what Elara had left behind, not just a story, a way of being. People began building lantern towers in their towns. They told the story of the woman who had waited not for a return, but for peace. They taught their children that love is not proven by presence, but by patience. That loyalty does not need applause. That some lights are lit not to guide others home, but to keep hope alive in the dark. And somewhere, far across the sea, sailors said a strange thing sometimes happened. A soft light, gold and gentle, would appear on stormy nights, guiding ships through the fog. Not a lighthouse, not a star, but something else. They called it Elara's flame. They didn't know her story, but somehow they felt it. For that is the nature of true love. It ripples beyond its moment, touches strangers, and teaches the world without needing to shout. Elara's lantern had never gone out. It had simply become 1,000 more, each one carried by someone new, someone brave enough to believe in the quiet kind of love, the kind that waits, the kind that endures, the kind that even after goodbye still shines. True love isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention or guarantees. It doesn't fade when time stretches on or when promises remain unfulfilled. It simply remains, faithful, patient, unwavering. Elara's story teaches us that love, in its purest form, is not measured by what we receive, but by what we continue to give, even in silence. Her quiet loyalty lit not just her window, but the hearts of an entire town, and eventually the world. Sometimes the most powerful legacies are not built with grand gestures, but with a small light that refuses to go out. If Elara's light touched something deep in you, if you've ever loved, waited, or believed in something when no one else did, then let that light live on, like this video, to keep the flame burning. Comment below. What does loyalty mean to you? Have you ever held on to a hope like Elara did? Subscribe and join us on this journey of timeless stories that remind us of what truly matters. Because somewhere out there, someone needs a little more light, and your interaction helps us reach them. Let's pass the lantern on together.